Hello everybody, welcome back. This is part 24 of Learning to Draw with Andrew Loomis' Fun with a Pencil. And now a note on foreshortening as we wrap up the figure. Really, if you'll see this page here on the right, thus endeth part 2. So we're pretty much done with his little brief stint on the figure. And we've covered a lot. Really, there's a great deal of pages beginning on page 80. What is it? 78? No, 70. Something like page 70. Oh, here we go. 78. From 78 all the way to pretty much 93, there's a variety of practice ones that you can work on. Basically, they go over a variety of different people that you can draw, different character types and so forth. And that's a lot of practice. But as we covered in the last two videos, drawing clothing on the figure, learning how to draw that, I'll leave the rest to you if you want to go and practice that some more. But here we're going to talk about foreshortening, and then later we jump into linear perspective and so forth. Foreshortening, basically, it says, unless one has a sound method of building, foreshortening is very difficult. So really all we've been doing up to this point is building. We build one layer of drawing, we build the second layer of the drawing, we build the third layer of the drawing, and so forth, and we've built up. And we understand things based off of three-dimensional shapes, as if we were children using blocks and creating things out of things. Using perspective without really having studied it, we can understand it by the fact that everything is a physical object and has height, width, depth, and so forth. So we've been using cubes, we've been using spheres, we've been using cylinders, all kinds of forms, and that's what he talks about building. And he's been teaching us, and we've been learning how to use these different building blocks in a repeated sort of pattern or a recognizable pattern, even while we creatively break those boundaries while understanding them, so that we have a really solid foundation of many different ways of looking at it, but these principles keep repeating, and there's many ways to reach the result that we're looking for. But this is all sound method of building. Then comes foreshortening, which we've already kind of been doing to a degree, because let's say when we take a Loomis head and we define the angle to be looking up, and we start to draw the features of the character as looking up, then we are already seeing the underside of the thing. We are foreshortening these features to a degree. The more we rotate that back, the face can occupy a space on that sphere of a very small space. And that's what you call, so you have the sphere, and then you have the nose, you have the mouth, you have the eyes, and it's the character looking directly up. And this is foreshortening, which is happening here in this sketch. But we haven't addressed that topic, particularly giving it a name called foreshortening, but some of you, I'm sure, have heard of this before. Foreshortening is basically, this is extreme foreshortening, where these arms are just condensed into this little tiny space, where in reality, seen from the side, they take up a lot more space. Same thing when you look at a plane. Okay, so a plane is a very long object that has, already I'm seeing foreshortening with these wings here, because the wings are coming directly at us. But when we rotate the plane around and we're looking directly at it, literally, we are seeing this, something like this, where you're seeing the front of the plane, you see the cockpit there, and really a ball, what appears to be a ball, which is crazy to think that something so long, viewed at the right angle, is the same as if you look at your fingers directly in such a way that they become little balls, basically. There's only 4 fingers, John. And this could be you holding your thumb and your fingers looking directly at them. Does that make sense? So foreshortening is a principle where things become foreshortened because you look at them in such a way. And well, let's read about what he says a little bit. In the figure at the right, the parts resemble the Duhinkus photos, which he talks about before. It's the word he made up for one of his characters. If you think of the figure as sections filled together, foreshortening takes on a new meaning. We We must build the figure as carefully as we built the head in part 1. Think of solids first, then of lines. So since the beginning, we've been talking about solids and so forth. That's the beginning of the way we look at it. But if we understand this figure as a collection of three-dimensional solids that are shapes, and they move based off the position we're looking at them, then you can understand, like I said, when we were drawing the figure with the shoulders, how everything follows a rule, like the arc of the shoulders and the head and so forth. The head can bend down as if bowing its head, but the shoulders didn't change. And the same with the spine. You have the spine here. The spine can move forward based off of its position. It has like this movement potential, but things still have to follow rules. So the same thing here, the head has to be in a certain position. So even if we foreshorten something and you have, like he says, you have the chess ball and the head happens behind it, it's somewhere, even though we're not seeing it, because in the end, if the chess ball is here, then what's in front of the chess ball? We're gonna see the pelvis box, as he describes it. And then we're gonna see the legs. Well, really, technically by his rules, they should go something like this, where they're coming here. And then we see the feet. And by this point, the feet are so large because they're so close to us. And then we have the little arms here. So this is like an extreme angle of looking from the bottom up. And things become smaller, as he says here. This one, he said he didn't really like this technique because he thought it might confuse us. But technically it makes sense because you basically make a rough sketch and profile, then carry important points across. So everything follows the same horizontality. Top of the head still lines up, bottom of the feet still line up, knee still lines up, but those features change because they're foreshortened. Okay, so he says, let's see. As we did below, we obtain foreshortening by projecting a profile in a front view or the reverse, as we did with the head. Establish the desired tilt and position of the parts. Then by parallel lines, build the other position of the figure so that all important points coincide. When the figure is close, increase the parts that are closest and diminish the parts that are farther away from you. This hand is technically larger and that's smaller, based off of foreshortening, because when something's far away, it's small. When it gets closer, it becomes larger. And that is something we will learn also in perspective. But let's flip this over and practice a little bit with this character now that we've given a solid introduction to foreshortening, at least in theory, talking about it. Let's explore it in practicality, even more so. Of course, I did those sketches and stuff, and that kind of tells you a little bit about it. So this one, he's established these two lines of perspective, which are important. And then we have a whole directionality from the tip of the toe to the top of the head, like so. This is perspective, that we're working in perspective. Then he's drawn this axis line, which defines the top of the pelvis box. And really, we're seeing this as a three-dimensional object. So if we define this as such, we are drawing the top face of the pelvis box, and then following it, since these lines of perspective go this way, of course we have depth to these parts, and the pelvis box goes something like this. So now we define the pelvis box of this character. Where does the spine happen? Happens if we draw a dotted line with something else that's less confusing. The spine happens back here, and it arches forward and then goes back. But picture as if you drew a line from the bottom of the spine to the top of the spine. And then, if you were sculpting that, you could take that wire, put it over here, and you could lay it on its side and say, okay, I'm gonna start here with the spine, and then I'm gonna imagine that the chess ball has to happen here. So I'm gonna arch it around, and then there it goes, it's at the top. So you have this arch, okay? Now, we have this as a side view. So if we draw a border, as if we were blocking this in as a flat rectangular shape, and then we decide to take this, grab onto this corner, and rotate it around so that it's facing this way, then we'll get some foreshortening happening. So bear with me. Translate this over to this. So midpoint to midpoint. That same thing happens. The same curve happens. The angle back here, this little sliver, seems smaller because of the foreshortening. And then we have that arch. So it's not really that much different. Now, if we take this to the extreme and we rotate that around so we're looking directly at it, you're not going to see anything. But in this case, we have this 3/4 view of this character here. So we're seeing the spine is going back here and meeting at the neck. And then what do we have here? The chest ball. The chest ball is happening here. Keep in mind that we are technically seeing foreshortening. So technically, if I was to take this character and pull them forward to a flattened position, this would get slightly smaller because this is closer to us at this point at this angle. So if we flatten this out, we picked up the character, rotated them, and laid them flat on the paper, we would get something like this. This piece was actually bigger because now it's not as far from us. Okay? Now, we're still following these lines of perspective. He's drawn the shoulders here. This shoulder goes through here and happens right here behind. You're not seeing it. It's happening behind on this edge because the chest is puffed out to a degree. Let's draw that midline and then draw the upside down V for the rib cage, like so. Now, we can draw the head here. So we're seeing the top of the chest ball stops here. We have a little bit of the shoulders right here and somewhere behind here that we can't see. Now, we do see a part of the neck, which should be lining up with the spine here, like so. And then this part, we're seeing part of this sphere, which is the head, is actually slightly behind the neck back here. So we can draw it like that. And that's what foreshortening is. These pieces are covering up. It's the same thing as if you had 3 cards and you put them in such a way on top of each other. So that would look something like this. The frontmost card would be like this. Behind it, you'd have another card, and then you'd have a smaller card back here. They follow those lines of perspective, believe it or not. So same thing is happening here. This neck is slightly occluding or blocking the sphere of the head. And the head is turned this way, which is another principle at play here. And look at this. We're seeing the underside of the chin right here. Why would we see the underside of it? We're seeing the underside of everything. We're seeing the underside of the pelvis box. We're seeing the underside of the rib cage. We're seeing the underside of everything. We're seeing the underside of the chin. And when this line arches forward as the front of the face, we're seeing less of the top of the head and more of the bottom of the head. Following these perspective rules, which is foreshortening in a nutshell. And this is why I say, because this is such a complex series of topics that we've been through for now 20 plus videos, is the more you see it from more different angles, you see that the same principles are at play, but you're seeing them from different angles. This whole body so far that we've drawn could be consolidated into, if we wanted, a rectangular shape, a 3-dimensional rectangle in perspective. Or we could also look at it as a cylinder. The same thing is happening. Later, we would subdivide that into its parts, putting the chest ball, putting the head, putting the pelvis box here. Struggling with it a little bit. Same thing here. You can analyze this shape, but the thing is that as a whole, it is converging onto, which I know we're getting into perspective a little bit here, but perspective is connected to foreshortening very much so. Everything is foreshortening into the horizon. So technically, yeah, the head is looking smaller than the chest, and this is looking bigger, which means, in theory, this character has a smaller pelvis box. Although it looks bigger, it's because it's closer to us. That's the reason it looks bigger. But technically, their pelvis box is actually kind of smaller, because like I said, when you flip this character over and you flip them over and you hold them flat to the page, you're seeing that these features which appeared smaller should now be bigger. Which is why technically you can be a smart aleck and you can say that if somebody doesn't foreshorten something and they're drawing it like we're drawing up here, and they're drawing that line and then they're saying it like this, that the pelvis box is like this, and then we have same size chest ball and we have the same size head as we normally would when we're drawing it straight on, that when you rotated that character, this would get bigger, this would get slightly bigger, and this would stay about the same because it's the closest thing, and then the proportions wouldn't be right. This is a theory, basically, in principle, but that's basically what's happening. Same thing, unfortunately I drew that in pen, but that's all right. Same thing is happening here. We have the character's the character's thigh is going up here, and the only thing I can tell you is, because we're not experts at just making this stuff up, is follow nature, or in this case follow his sketch, and find out where does the knee happen. It just happens a little bit to the left of the pelvis box, and you can define the angle like so. There's where the knee happens. It doesn't seem right, but really the hip is beginning here, that's going here, and then you can follow that angle if you want, like that. And then of course we have this foot. In this case, the foot should be pretty large. It should be, as he's drawn it, at least as big as the head, because why? Because of the foreshortening. So we have that character drawn in there. In this case, it might be good to get some kind of, we'll just have this character wearing shoes to simplify and not overwork this sketch, but the bottom of the foot is seen. We see the top of the foot arching back, and the heel, and like a superhero kind of pose, we're seeing a lot of the bottom leg, and then we're seeing the knee here, following this like so, and then this goes in front here like so, and we're seeing basically all the way to the back of the thigh here is just like this, which doesn't seem right to some people, but really in reality that's correct. If we add a little bit of shading to distinguish that this is behind this part of the character, it makes sense. This foot, of course, going down that way. By the way, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments and hopefully I can help out. This leg is a little straighter positioned, and that just kind of arches down. The knee's about here. This leg goes here. You can measure with these things to help you. And you can do that even in nature when you're looking at something right in front of you. We're still seeing the bottom of the foot here. And then we're seeing that ankle like so. And notice how big the foot should be based off of the positioning here. This foot is technically behind this one. This one is closer to us because it's in front of this foot, so it has to be. And there you go. You've got this long character. It gets longer, so if you don't give yourself enough room, and you have to take into account that things get larger as they get closer to you, sometimes that does happen. So we have the hips here following that character like so. I've learned a lot from this video. I hope you guys have too. If you do, let me know in the comments. It's nice to know that we're helping each other out. I'm learning here, you're learning. Now watch what happens with this arm here. We just find that the arm is bent on itself so much so that the hand happens here. And remember, it's kind of small because we're up in this small territory where things are farther from us. We're closer to the feet here. And then this arm, the hand goes like this, and then we have that forearm overlapping and foreshorten. It's a foreshortening reality happening there. The forearm over top of the other arm. And then similar to this leg, this arm just kind of goes straight out here, which leaves us our other hand. And then, but notice the length. This is getting occluded by the chest ball, and this length should be slightly longer than this one based off of it's closer to the viewer. But there you have it. That's it. That's the principle. And let me know what you guys think in the comments. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It does help me in my career as a professional artist. I enjoy so much helping you guys to learn, and I've learned so much from this. I hope you guys have enjoyed and understood really well the principles of foreshortening and have been able to put it into practice. Keep up the practice, draw a lot. You're gonna learn a lot from, especially from live observation of nature. The more you can draw yourself, you can draw other people as long as they're comfortable with it, that's okay. And anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have, and I look forward to seeing the next video. Until next time, God bless you guys.